So what are the best chords for a beginner guitar player to learn? Now I know on this channel you might be used to me talking about the more complex nature of the guitar, but I figured we'd show those beginners some love today too and dive into some nice, easy beginner guitar chords. But that's not all. We're also going to take a look at some basic music theory surrounding the idea of chord progressions. Now, why would we do this? You know why. Because you're a guitar player, and this is GuitarAmado. Well, hello everybody, and welcome back to another exciting episode of GuitarAmado. I'm your host, Adam Amado. Happy Friday to you all, and remember, I'm coming at you with new episodes every single Friday, so definitely hit that subscribe button if you like what you see. Now, as you all know, learning to play the guitar can be quite a complex endeavor, but have no fear, today we're going to take a break from that and take a look at some very simple, easy beginner guitar chords. All right, so we're going to start with the three most common chords that every beginner, at least in my opinion, should know. And that is a G chord, a C add 9 chord, and a D chord. So first of all, why is C add 9 instead of a normal C, which would be played like this? You know, there's definitely a big difference in the sound, right? Normal C, C add 9. You know, so it's not right or wrong if you prefer one over the other, but for a beginner, that normal C chord can be quite a challenge. Actually, that's probably the hardest chord out of all three of those because it's the most spread out. So you really got to get used to having your fingers spread out to get that chord to sound good. So there's two primary reasons then that we would use a C add 9. First of all, your fingers are a lot closer together, so it's going to be a lot more comfortable. And the second reason, which I think is even more important, is that this C add 9 chord is very similar as far as the shape goes to the G chord. So the third and fourth finger play the exact same notes between both chords, and then your first and second finger stay in the same shape, they just change strings. So going from this C add 9 to a G chord, all I have to do is move each of these first and second fingers up a string. They stay in the same frets and the same shape. You're just moving back and forth. So with the C add 9, you're on the 5th and 4th strings. With the G, you're on the 6th and 5th strings. But that makes that chord switch so much easier. So now when we move from that C add 9 to the D chord, we don't quite have those same common fingers, but we do have one of them, and that is the third finger in the 3rd fret of the 2nd string. So that finger can stay down when switching. Moving these two fingers into position, but also lifting your pinky. And actually, that pinky note is kind of fun to play around with. You kind of sneak in some little hints of a melody within your chord progression just by playing around with that pinky. So that'd be the 3rd fret of the 1st string and the 2nd fret, those two notes. Just kind of sprinkle those in with your chords and it'll make you sound like a pro in no time. And one more thing with these first three chords here, moving back to a G from a D. So you see we still got that same 3rd fret, 2nd string, that common finger there with the 3rd finger. So I'm leaving that down, moving to the G chord. So let's quickly take a look at the theory behind this chord progression. Why do these chords sound so good together? Well, the key that we're playing in is the key of G, which means if we take a look at the notes of a G major scale, and then we label each of these notes with a number That's going to tell us what scale degree each note is. But more importantly, we're looking for G, C, and D. And that's going to be numbers 1, 4, and 5. So you may have heard that term before tossed around if you've been in the guitar world for a while. And that is a 1-4-5 chord progression. Very, very, very common chord progression in music in general. Not just the key of G major, but all keys. No matter what key you're in, you will always play major chords when playing the 1, the 4, and the 5. Now, in our particular example, we are using that C add 9 chord. Just know that that doesn't change the key at all. We're just kind of changing that chord structure just a little bit, just to give our fingers an easier transition in the beginning. But once you get those transitions down when you're including that C add 9 chord, I highly recommend that you also learn the regular C. Just remember, that one's going to take a little extra practice for most of you. All right, so there's one last chord that I want to show you that is also very beginner friendly here, and that is the E minor 7 chord. Now, don't let the 7 intimidate you too much. You know, it's kind of like that C add 9. We're only turning it into this E minor 7 chord to make those chord transitions a little bit easier for all you beginners out there. So if we take a look at this regular E minor chord first, where it's just a 2-finger chord, you're playing in the 2nd fret on the 5th string and the 4th string, and the rest of the strings are open. So that is a pretty easy chord shape. Now, why would we even be messing with it then? Why make it an E minor 7 chord? That sounds like an unnecessary complexity, right? Well, if we take a look at this E minor 7 now, what do you notice about that? It's that 3rd and 4th finger. They're in the 3rd fret again of the 1st and 2nd strings, just like the C add 9 and the G chord. So once again, it just gives you those common fingers to use as an anchor point when you're switching to that E minor chord. Plus, I think it just gives you a little richer harmonic texture as well. You know, I like the sound of that chord better than a regular E minor chord. Sounds a lot prettier, right? So now let's go ahead and shift back into theory mode here and bring up our scale and scale degree numbers. So we've looked at the 1, 4, and 5, but now look at number 6. Aha, that happens to be the E chord, right? So if we throw this chord into the mix now, we can take a look at another very common chord progression. In fact, this is probably my favorite classic chord progression here, and that is a 1 to 6 to 4 to 5. So we've got the 1 is our G major, our 6 is our E minor 7, our 4 is our C add 9, and our 5 is the D major. So that might already be sounding very familiar to you, right? Let me play it a little faster and see if your ears catch on to anything. So right there, my mind, I always hear the song Earth Angel from way back when, in probably the 1950s, I think. So I always kind of hear that whenever I hear that chord progression. It makes me think of that song, that Earth Angel, will you be mine? Another song from back in that era that was kind of repopularized by Pearl Jam maybe a decade or so ago, maybe a couple decades now. I don't know. Early 2000s, I think. That Last Kiss song that they had, the As you can tell, I don't really know the words, but yeah, that same chord progression with a slightly different strum pattern, but it's still that 1, 6, 4, 5. And finally, one last thing that I want to show you before I leave you today. We can't forget about that creativity, right? Got to challenge your creative side. So these chord progressions that I just showed you, we got the 1-4-5, and then we have the 1-6-4-5. You can take all four of those chords and switch up the order and experiment with different strum patterns and different lengths for holding out each chord. So once you put in the practice time to be able to switch between these chords seamlessly, you can get super creative with it and just start making stuff up and just, G, D, E minor, C, add 9. So, bunch of random stuff there, but you can see they all sound good together no matter what order or rhythm you put with it. It's totally up to you. So it's a really good chance to exercise that creative muscle and just see what kind of cool sounding stuff that you can come up with. But if that's not really your thing, don't worry. There are plenty of songs out there that use all sorts of combinations of these chords. So first of all, we've got like Sweet Home Alabama, every beginner's favorite, right? So we got so that's just the D, C add 9 to the G. So that would be a 5-4-1 progression, right? So another super beginner-friendly song here would be Every Rose Has Its Thorn, from back in the 80s, that hair band era. So we've got a G to a C add 9. And that's pretty much all. Once again, I don't know the words. But yeah, I think actually like later on in the chorus or maybe the bridge or something, there is that E minor 7 that gets thrown into the mix. But once again, those are those nice anchor point chords there with that third and fourth finger. And then maybe another song to check out, one of my favorites from back in the 90s by Green Day here, would be that Time of Your Life song. I think it's technically called Good Riddance. So it uses all four of those chords, but this one's a really good example for how you can switch up the order of the chords throughout the song. So we've got like the main verse chord progression is just the G to C add 9 to D. So and then that one I like to kind of play around with that pinky idea again. So we got so I kind of lay it down before I actually switch to the G chord. So then halfway through the verse, it'll switch to the E minor 7, to a D, to a C add 9, to a G. So there it uses all four of the chords. So for example, that would be the parts like, so make the best of this test and don't ask why. It's not a question, but a lesson learned in time. It's something unpredictable, and in the end it's right. So right there, it switches again, and it only goes back and forth between the E minor and the G. Something unpredictable, but in the end it's right. I hope you had the time of... Oh, and then it switches again right there. So it goes, hope you had the time of your life. So that's the E minor 7, D, G. So that's a really good one to try out if you're interested in seeing some great examples of how these chords can be rearranged for different parts of a song. So that's all for today. Just wanted to share those nice 4 beginner-friendly guitar chords with you and give you some ideas for working in some of that creativity. Now, if you've got some other chords that you happen to be experimenting with, feel free to drop those in the comments. Maybe you're having some trouble or you're interested in a particular chord progression, I would be happy to answer those questions for you. But otherwise, I will see you in the next video, and until then, happy practicing, my friend.